Hi everyone, so the Dawn of the Hunt League is about to start, patch 0.2 is around the corner, and Rogue Exiles are coming to Path of Exile too. And in preparation for that, I decided to sit down and look at all of the uniques that exist in the game, and what would actually happen if Rogue Exiles used them against you. So if you don't know, Rogue Exiles will randomly wear gear that is just, same as player gear basically, and they can have all of the random core drop pool uniques. They can't have boss uniques, so I didn't go through those because there's also some pretty crazy stuff, but luckily we don't have to deal with that. But also when you find a Rogue Exile that has a certain unique, that unique will then drop when you kill that exile. But I thought it was just like kind of a curious little exercise in order to prepare for this, to get a bit of an understanding of what is going on. So I'm going to go through this with you. Some of these items are actually really crazy, and I expect that people probably just rip instantly in some cases. So especially on hardcore, which I'll be playing for the most part, I guess, that is going to be really dangerous. I need to be instantly aware of the danger that some of these items can pose. There's items that give them insane amounts of extra damage, or they remove your resistances and these kind of things. So I do expect you're going to see a lot of rip clips from people just getting one shot by these Rogue Exiles. And in other cases, they can also just become pretty much completely immortal, or they surprise you, for example, with certain ailment effects, crowd control effects, that will just kind of throw you off guard, and then they might overpower you. So I do expect these Rogue Exiles to be somewhat dangerous across the board, just because of what they sounded like they would be. They said that Rogue Exiles will appear in 1 in 12 maps, for example, so they're not that common, which means that they're probably relatively tough fights. So I expect them to be maybe something like on the range of like half a map boss or whatever. So something like that, but in some cases they can become pretty crazy. And while we're at it, I want to also give a shout out to my sponsor, the Crimson Market. I've been working with these guys for a long time, and they have also prepared a little event here for Path of Exile 2 that I want to show off real quick. And if you don't know the Crimson Market, they originally started here with a Diablo 4, making like a trading platform, and they do monthly big PC giveaways that I will also show you in a second. So a big thank you to Crimson Market for sponsoring this video, and for the prices and the challenges they have devised. You have this here. I'll link this down in the description as well, so you can go check this out. You can earn cash prizes, kind of minor ones, but it's a fun, nice little challenge and some kind of community event that they're trying to make here, which is nice. And you can, for example, see the challenges up here. So there are submissions. You can just like submit a video clip or something, and the first people to do certain bosses or reach certain milestones will receive a reward here, and they're gonna obviously be listed. And if that goes well, I guess they're also gonna make more. And now about those PC giveaways that I just mentioned. Well, we have that here. So when you go up here to the club, they have the Crimson Market Loyalty Club, it's called, where they give away these massive custom built PCs. So they also have collaborations here with Starforge that they do sometimes. You can even ask them to build your own custom PC if you want. So they have been doing a lot of really cool stuff here. Look at this. Very cool, like themed PCs as well. So they had, like, for example, here the Path of Exile clock. There was like Bumblebee. This is like a Diablo 4 from the expansion for the Spiritborn kind of PC here. Lots of really cool stuff. Very high quality, handmade. So the way this works is that everyone who is part of the loyalty club has a chance to win. Are these loyalty points that they accrue over time the longer you are. But overall, everyone has a chance to get this PC. And the way to do this for free is with the Crimson Market Golden Ticket. So we have this here. You can sign up for free using, I think, a PayPal account or a Stripe account. You can also cancel it immediately. There's no minimum fee or minimum subscription or something like that. And then you are in the run, and then the PC will be given away, usually on Rax's stream or on my stream. In this case, it will be this weekend on Rax's live stream, but I will also be there to check it out live while he spins the wheel. And the PC coming up this time is the Black Box Gamer. That's going to be this weekend. Here are the specifications as well. It looks very sleek and really cool in my book, so you want to not miss that chance. And in addition to that, if you're not going to be the lucky winner of this PC, they also do smaller giveaways for little consoles. So we have that here. There's an Asus ROG Ally coming up, for example. They're also doing PlayStation 5 Pros and Xbox Series X regularly every few weeks. So that is like another extra perk for being in a club. If you want to learn more about the Crimson Market and the giveaways, then go check out the links in the description or in the pinned comment. And now let's go back to the video here. So going through this list of uniques, I found that there are some pretty crazy outliers of items. You also have to keep in mind that this is before the league has actually launched, so we don't actually know like many of the new uniques coming. GG has said there's going to be 100 new uniques. We have seen like a handful of those only. So there might be more stuff that needs to be added to this list. And as we find out about that and we get data mines and whatever, we will definitely go back to this and then update this. But for now, this is kind of like my pre-launch estimate here, I guess, with how things are going to go. Sometimes it will also depend a little bit on the build that you are playing. For example, there might be certain items that are really bad because of certain damage types or because of how they affect different builds. Like ES builds might suffer a little bit more from certain things, for example. So I'm just going to go through this and give you my danger rating, basically. But again, this doesn't necessarily reflect this under all circumstances. Sometimes there could even be combos of certain items that Exiles can wear. Then things can get really nasty, but we'll see how this will go, and hopefully it won't be that bad. But yeah, to go through this list now, I'm just gonna start with like kind of the craziest items out there and then kind of like work my way down, I guess. So I have this danger rating here, goes from 1 being the least to 10 the highest. So yeah, we can start with the first 10, for example, Bramble Jack. So this is a very interesting unique. It has 250% of physical melee damage taken reflected. So this means that if you walk up to like, you know, some rogue exile wearing this thing and you hit him for just 2000 damage, you're basically dead as a warrior. So this is how it's gonna go. So this is like the absolute melee killer. If you find a Bramble Jack rogue exile, you need to stay clear of them. And maybe, okay, if you have like an elemental conversion or something, that might be okay. But if you're like a typical like mace build, most of that stuff is physical. So you gotta be aware of that. The same can also happen to huntresses and to monks, for example, at least like, you know, quarterstaffs and so on. So you gotta be careful there. And yeah, you might just instantly one-shot yourself. So I hope that this is not going to happen, but I kind of expect it will. Then we have another one, the Coming Calamity. This is actually a new item coming up. This is the Triple Herald chest, and it says nearby enemies have no elemental res. And this means that if you walk up to this guy, well, you will have 0 resistances, and that means in most cases you will take at least quadruple damage, and if you invest into more maximum res, then even more. So you can take like, you know, times 5, times 8 or something damage, and you might just get instantly one-tapped, not just by the Rogue Exile, but also by any other monster that's nearby. So you gotta be very careful when you see that. Then you have another interesting one, the Birth of Fury. This is a pair of boots, and it says that it drops ignited ground, dealing 10% of the life per second. And, well, I don't really know how much life Exiles will have, but I do expect them to be in the hundreds of thousands, at least on the higher tier maps. And 10% of that is like, let's say, 10,000, 20,000, whatever. Okay, you have fire res, you're going to reduce it to like a quarter of that or so. But even that leaves us with thousands of damage per second that if you walk over the ground effect, it will just like instantly pop, basically. So I think that's going to be pretty nasty. Also something to be aware of. Another interesting thing here that I found was the Pillar of the Caged God. So this is the typical stat stacking, like quarterstaff action that people were doing. And I don't know if the Exiles will have attributes or if they will have like a kind of like a fake passage tree or something like that with a lot of stats and it increases to their damage. But the thing is that if you find an exile with Pillar of the Caged God and he actually doesn't have like a passive tree behind him, meaning that he's like balanced around not having any increases, he might suddenly be a lot more powerful thanks to this item, because there is extra melee damage based on the amount of strength. And if whatever, you know, strength value that exile has is actually really high, you might do suddenly like double, triple, or whatever kind of damage. So I'm not really sure yet, but it could be pretty dangerous as well. Now let's go over the next tier of danger, which is 9. So we have Maligaro's Virtuosity. This is a pair of gloves that says crit bonus is 300%. So yeah, I don't really expect a lot of crit action from exiles, but if they crit here, they will do triple the damage instead of like, I think only a 60% bonus or something. So it's suddenly a lot more dangerous, and I think this can really take you by surprise sometimes, where you're fighting an exile and suddenly you get absolutely blasted. So gotta be aware of that. Then we have the Beacon of Aziz, also crit related. Crits ignore resistances. That is probably even more dangerous than the Maligaro's Virtuosity here that I just mentioned. Kind of the same story as the Coming Calamity. So no resistances. yeah, can kill you very easily. But I guess Coming Calamity has like, you know, the aura that just like completely negates the resistances even for other monsters. And here it's only for the Exile and only on a crit. So it is very dangerous, but it won't happen that often at least. And then we also have the charm here. This is a new unique charm coming up, Beira's Anguish. When ignited, ignite nearby enemies for 25% of max HP. Now, I'm not really sure if Exiles can have charms, but maybe. And if they can, well, we have kind of the same problem as the Birth of Fury boots here. You ignite them, and then they pop the charm, and then they ignite you for 25% of their HP. And again, if this is like in the hundreds of thousands, you are just dead. So this is it. So this is also something to be careful with if you see this charm. Now moving on to 8, we have the Death's Harp Bow. Now I'm not really sure how the weapon damage will work of Exiles and how much the attack damage actually matters that they have on their weapon. I do expect that they have a bit of like a special rule where they probably have like a certain number of damage in addition to whatever weapon they are wearing. Death's Harp is a pretty low level item, but it does have +3 arrows. And if Exiles are actually balanced to have kind of like similar damage output no matter what weapon they have, it wouldn't really matter that this is a low level unique. What I'm saying is they can easily shotgun you with a lot of damage if that is the case. So you gotta be aware of +3 arrows is no joke. And compared to players, monsters have the ability to shotgun you with any skill. So it doesn't matter what kind of ability the Exile uses, unless there are some special, you know, rules that VG has done here where the Exile player skills work the same as the player skills basically, but I don't really expect that. So I do expect that they can shotgun you with everything, and that can really take you by surprise. Now let's talk about some of the other like kind of like mid-range danger items here, let's say, so 7 and 6s and so on. So we have, for example, the Leer cast. Nearby allies have +50% damage. That depends whether this actually buffs other monsters. So it could be that Exiles are not actually allied to monsters, but who knows, but +50% damage might take you a bit by surprise as well, if there's like other elites around or something. Then we have the Radiant Grief, especially for ES builds, that's going to be really dangerous, or in some cases, depending on what kind of skills the Exiles use. For example, we have like Gas Arrow, Gas Grenade. There were some pretty popular builds using Radiant Grief Helm that just permanently ignites everything around it, and this means that they can instantly pop their gas explosions, for example. But most importantly, your ES will not recharge throughout the entire fight because you're permanently just a little bit ignited, and this means you just don't have any recharge, so you gotta be aware of that. And then we have the Wild Knight, also pretty dangerous. This is a helm that gives you +4% increased damage per second of an enemy in your presence. So if the Exile has that and you fight him for a while, he will ramp up his damage done to you really quickly. After 25 seconds, you will be at double damage taken, and who knows, sometimes these Exile fights might last a little while. So I think this can also take some people by surprise, especially the weaker builds. Then we also have Doriani's prototype here. Nearby enemies have lightning res equal to yours. So this is also pretty nasty, especially for lightning builds that use Conductivity Curse and reduce the resistance of the Exile, for example. But in general, I don't really expect them to have that much resistances, just maybe some random resistances that they have from their gear, basically, from whatever items are generated. But yeah, this will mean that if there's an Exile that uses lightning skills, you gotta be very careful. Then we have Surfy's Therapy. This is a Soul Eater effect, which actually was just nerfed, so it's actually not that bad anymore. I just have it in the list. But Soul Eater is still Soul Eater. So they will ramp up extra speed, they will ramp up extra damage, less damage taken. And this means that you gotta be aware of when there's a lot of enemies around and they have this equipped. Another kind of important item here is Corpse Weight, I think. This has a Decompose skill, also kind of popular. It has been nerfed a little bit now, but it will still be pretty good, I think. And this means if an Exile has that and there's other enemies around, or you kite him around through dead enemies, he will constantly pop these corpses and there will be these gas clouds everywhere. And I think this will be very dangerous as well when this actually, you know, takes the monster HP values and then creates these gas clouds that just do a lot of damage. So gotta be aware of those. Then we also have down here the Burden of Shadows staff. So this is an interesting one. So it has +1% extra chaos damage per free life cost of a skill, and it converts the mana cost to life costs. Now the life costs will not really matter for the Exiles because they have a lot of life. But what this means that is if they have like actually like a 6-link skill that can easily cost like 400, 500 something mana or so. And in that case, they can get something like easily +100, 150% extra chaos damage to their spells. So this can get really wild here. And I think we also gotta be aware of this. Or if we imagine if they also have the new nerfed Eldritch Battery, they will say something like double the mana cost. So in that case, some of the skills can go to like 1,000 mana cost, or maybe they even have Archmage and mana stacking shenanigans. Like this stuff can get really crazy, I think. This means that if you find an Exile caster, that could be kind of like an insta-rip here. Then we also have like a new item coming up, the Hammer of Faith. This is a two-handed mace. It gives a random shrine buff every 10 seconds. Now, I'm not really sure what is the exact mechanic here, if those shrine buffs kind of cycle every 10 seconds, or if you actually ramp them up, because they last more than 10 seconds in most cases. But either way, shrines are pretty impactful. There's the freezing shrines, the meteor shrines, but there's also stuff like acceleration that gives them plus 60% speed. They're going to be zapping around. There's going to be the immunity shrine. They can just be completely immortal. And yeah, this can also really take you by surprise, I believe. So gotta be aware of what is going on. And now there's like a bunch of other items that are not really all that crazy, but maybe it's still worth mentioning. Crown of the Pale King. Thorns is triggered by all hits, so if Thorns, at least in the future, maybe ever becomes like a real thing, this could be dangerous at least. Then we have Date Bell, Nearby Corpses Explode, and Warcry. Now we'll see if there's actually going to be Warcry on those Exiles, and you can kind of like, play around that. Anyway, there's Miris Uxor, 100% increase Cunning Strike threshold. Not very dangerous, but it might take you by surprise in case they get you really low, and then that's it. So want to be aware. We have the Sierran Inheritance. Effect on chill on you is reversed. Now, I'm not 100% sure how this works when you actually freeze them, but this means that cold builds or like any kind of builds that chill might actually make them much faster, and they might also be much more dangerous then. Then we have the Arizwane's Wings. That gives Decimating Strike to the Exiles. Now, I'm not really sure how this will work exactly when you have, for example, Energy Shield, because Decimating Strike works against full life enemies, and then does like based on that life damage to you. So if you actually have Energy Shield, they might actually just proc Decimating Strike multiple times even at once until you start losing life. So this might be kind of rough. And I also don't know how this will work with like CI, for example. But either way, you can get surprised by like a really big first initial hit. Then we have Death Blow that has Cunning Strike, but Cunning Strike against unique enemies is only 5%, so it's not that crazy. At least I expect that players are counted as unique enemies. Then we have Gravebind. Nearby slain enemies count as being killed by you. I don't really know yet if this is going to be a problem, but it might be something to be aware of in case there are some on-kill effects that the Exiles will start proccing, for example, when you kill surrounding enemies. Then we have here Ming's Heart here, 40% of damage as extra chaos. That's not a tiny value, so we gotta be aware when they have this. That's especially for ES builds. This means like almost double damage basically. Then we have the Seeing Stars Mace, gives energy generation is doubled. I'm not really sure if this is going to be a big deal, but if there's like some really like proc heavy setup, for example, on the Rogue Exiles, they can like maybe proc a lot more stuff suddenly. Terran's Shiver has 100% freeze buildup, and frozen enemies take 50% extra damage. So in case you let them freeze you, this is going to be pretty nasty. Then we have Hrimnor's Hymn. Slams cause aftershocks. This can also be pretty impactful. So again, with what I mentioned earlier with the weapons, depending on how the like attack damage works for Exiles, if they have like some kind of like base value and then the weapon they wear is just on top, this is a very low level item. But if that is how it works, then they could make some, really big aftershocks basically. And this basically doubles their damage and can also take it by surprise. Then we have the Trefina two-handed mace, 100% crit against stunned enemies. So in case that happens to you, you want to be careful. We have the Collapsing Horizon Quarterstaff. Trigger skills refund half the energy, so it's kind of the same as the energy generation is doubled here from the Seeing Stars. We have the Chernobox Pillar. This is 1% extra fire damage per 1% block. This is actually a new shield that's coming up. So this is also kind of dangerous if Rogue Exiles are run around with 50% block, 70% block or something like that. A lot of extra damage here. Then we have the Crest of Ardura. It gives 50% cooldown recovery rate. So this might also be a bit dangerous depending on the skills that they're using. But in some cases they might just kind of like throw cooldowns at you non-stop basically. Then we have the Liquor Day shield here that says blocking poisons the enemies as if you're dealing 200 damage with chaos, and this is not really such a big deal, I think, but this is a level, I think, 28 item, So if you find an exile somewhere in Act 4 or in Act 5 or something like that, and you start attacking him and you fight him for a while, you might actually just get poisoned to death really fast. And that also kind of concludes this list here of like the dangerous uniques here. There are some other things that I have also found that are kind of worth noting. So there is ways for exiles to become really tanky to the point of immortal, and there's some conversion stuff and ailment stuff that I want to go through. And there's also a few items that actually make the exiles potentially just instantly die, which is kind of funny, but I'm going to go over that in a second. Now let's talk about the exiles getting tanky. So we have these here. The biggest thing is Defiance of Destiny, OP item from Path of Exile 1. It's also in Path of Exile 2 in a nerfed version, but it says recover 10% of missing life before taking hits. So again, if you're going back to just thinking about, okay, how much life will they have? Let's say a few 100,000. Well, you have to do some pretty big hits in order to even do any damage to them at all at some point. And this means that some builds will straight up just not be able to kill them, or you have to maybe, you know, swap in another skill and then try to take them down with some dot damage or something. But yeah, this can be pretty wild, but I think it's also going to be extremely rare, so maybe not that bad. Then we have the Quattle's mold cannot be poisoned. So yeah, for poison builds, that's going to be a big problem, because poison builds usually pretty much do only poison. So yeah, that's going to be tough. We also have, for example, Ashrand cannot be ignited. Now, ignite builds are not really a big deal right now, but also worth noting, I guess, maybe for the future. We have the Devouring Diadem as well. Every 3 seconds, consume a corpse for 20% life. So you have to kind of play around that, keep them away from other enemies, or kind of let them clean everything up first before you actually kill them, because it might be hard to actually out DPS this healing. We also have here the Surrender, recover 4% life on block. This is a shield. So also pretty tanky, I guess, when you fight some of those exiles, especially for fast hitting skills, or if you have minion builds and you have like tons of hits coming in all the time. Also, another shield is the Rise of the Phoenix, lots of life regen. So you can be aware of that. And lastly, the Brass Dome. Take no extra damage from crits. Now, you know, crit builds, you know, at that point you might be fine actually having enough damage anyway, because it's usually pretty high end stuff. But it is worth noting that, you know, suddenly you might just only do like a quarter of your damage or something like that. Now, here's also some items that can convert damage and ailments. So this also means that, you know, you might actually at some point know all of the Rogue Exiles by heart, because there's only so many of them, and you know, okay, this guy does this ability and he has these kind of spells and so on. And this means that maybe at some point you might get really surprised by a Rogue Exile that does fire damage suddenly freezing you, or like, you know, freezing you with like a lightning spell or something like that. So this is mostly why I made this list. It's not really that crazy, I guess, but there's also, for example, like a pin from Bushwhack on the boots. So pin buildup is very fast, and if you suddenly can't move, he might just kill you because you can't dodge around anymore and stuff like that. So you gotta be aware of that at least. And then yeah, a bunch of conversion items here. So that's Call of the Brotherhood, Whisper of the Brotherhood, Original Sin, 100% of Elemental to Chaos conversion. That could be really bad for ES builds, for example. We have double stun buildup on Bryn Hand's Mark, so they might stun you with that. There's an electrocution buildup on the Brain Rattler, and this can kind of just come in addition to whatever else they're doing. And then we also have Blue Flame Bracers, Fire now does cold damage, Kitokos, Current, lightning damage electrocutes, and the Painter Servant that converts all of the elemental into 1/3 of each of them, so they can actually do all of the elements suddenly. And we have to keep in mind that in Dawn of the Hunt, like the player ailment threshold is halved, which means that all of these elemental ailments will just be applied to you much more easily. So I do expect to get frozen, shocked, ignited, and so on much more often. So you want to maybe take a look here. And lastly, to look at the kind of fun part of this here, we have 4 items right now where yeah, exiles might just instantly die, basically. So kind of funny stuff. And we have the Visage of Aya that gives you Eldritch Battery that converts all of your energy shield to mana. So if there's an exile that is reliant on the Chaos Inoculation, they'll have 1 life and no energy shield, and it will just instantly die when you find them. So that's kind of funny, I think. I'm really looking forward to seeing that at some point. We have the Demon Stitcher gloves, where they sacrifice life to gain mana, and I mean, that will probably kill them pretty fast. I think it's like 15% of the current life or something like that that you sacrifice whenever you cast. So they do like a few casts and they will just basically be dead no matter what, unless they have like a CI setup here. And then we have the body armor, the Black Doubt, that says dot damage taken bypasses ES. Kind of same story for CI again. So anything that is like, you know, this like, you know, change energy shields, bypass the energy shield, anything that's like CI. It might be kind of funny with the exiles. Now, I don't know if there will be exiles that have Chaos Inoculation, but I do expect we'll see that, because it's like a, you know, pretty big character theme that they're going with. So we'll see. But overall, kind of funny as well. And then we also have the Soul Tether Belt, where again, if there's like a CI or at least like very heavily invested into Energy Shield build, they will lose 5% energy shield per second just by existing, basically. So they will also just kind of like melt away. So this is what I got here for now. This is the entire list of all of the uniques that I found that are in the core drop pool that I think at least will be in a core drop pool. We don't have confirmation about some of the new stuff yet, like Common Calamity, for example. Now, I do hope that it's not going to be as bad as I made it out to be, because maybe GG has seen this in advance, and maybe they did a bit of tweaking there to make sure the Rogue Exiles are not too crazy. But at least for the start, I would definitely expect we're gonna see some wild stuff. And there's a lot of new uniques, so yeah, good luck, I guess. I'll try to keep updating this as we find more uniques, so there might definitely be some crazy stuff out there that we have to be, putting on this list. And I might do like a follow-up video or something. But for now, you can go check out this list as well down in the description. I will link this spreadsheet here. So this is a public spreadsheet. You can just check it out. I might also make it more pretty and stuff. But yeah, this is what I got here. So let me know what you think, or if I maybe missed some items or, whatever, just share your thoughts. And other than that, I hope that you enjoyed this. Wish you good luck in Dawn to Hunt. I'm excited, and I'll see you guys next time.